Hello and welcome to Enjoy Every Sandwich, episode 3. I've titled this episode Things Will Work Out Just Fine. And there is a backstory to that. My guest today, my first guest, my first ever guest on this podcast, is someone that I became super friendly with, that I met online in the gaming community. And he is the host of his own podcast and the owner of his own company and lots of other things entitled In the Keep. And I'm glad to be repping that here today. And so, online, his username, hopefully he doesn't mind me sharing, is the Motherload. And of course, if you know the band Mastodon, the Motherload is one of the songs that they have on a really good album. And Things Will Work Out Just Fine is a cool lyric from there. And so, yeah, we're just going to roll with that. Of course, I am still Zach. And so let me bring in my guest. Welcome, Ty, to the show.
Hello, everybody.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's an interesting weekend. I'm like house sitting
Mhm.
and pet sitting for a friend, so I'm not at my podcast station right now. Usually my mic quality would be on point, you know me, but this is the
I do.
laptop setup, so a little more casual than usual.
You taught me a lot about mic setup, because I was pretty much doing what you were doing, and this was my main microphone for for a long time. I was like, that doesn't work for podcasts.
Yeah. Uh, See, I just had like a fucking Razer headset. Can we curse on this show? I didn't want to overstep a boundary, but
Why the fuck not?
I, I don't know. That's fine.
Yeah.
So I don't even remember what I was talking about when I said it. I got so caught up with whether or not I could curse on your show.
We were talking about headset microphone
Yeah,
quality.
I
Yeah.
had this fucking Razer headset that was like really lo-fi or whatever, and it served the purpose. And I always had that philosophy of like, podcast audio does not have to be spectacular. I've listened
Right.
to a lot of podcasts that were recorded, with field microphones or Zoom H4Ns or whatever, and as long as it's clear and audible, I don't even mind some ambient noise. That's not a big deal to me. Uh, but after a couple dozen episodes or so, people start
Yeah.
talking about this kind of stuff, and you get feedback from your audience, and you get feedback for me. It was like from the other folks that working around it in the keep. There, Nabe is a. If you've ever met Nabe, I think you have probably.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, is like, I keep him around like as a friend because he will always just flat out tell me uh,
Hmm.
how to fix things or what's wrong, and
Yeah.
not hold back on it. So yeah, he was just like kind of brutal with me. He's like, you need to invest in like $500 worth of microphone equipment if you want to do this professionally, and so that whipped me into shape. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, for you too, like, so I started doing these just as like a hobby for a video game. And I was, the people in the community were listening to it. So 30 people, maybe. I mean, I'm not sure. And so until you start putting yourself out there like you started, um, I think I was on like a very, very early episode, like maybe episode 4 or 5 or
you were
something.
super super early
Yeah.
because
And,
at the time I was like scouring the
yeah.
world for all online, arena shooter, retro shooter communities, and the multiplayer Doom Federation was like one of the coolest things going on,
Mhm.
and you fit the bill immediately.
Yeah, and so, well, why don't you talk about your podcast a little bit? So you speak to people all over the FPS world, right?
I, Not even FPS. At this point, like the show has evolved so much since
Mhm.
like when you were on, right? It started off literally. It was. I mean, in the intro, I was saying the show is all about arena first-person shooters,
Mhm.
and then it became, like very quickly, like, but Dusk is really cool, and all these other cool games that the same people who play online Doom and Quake and all that kind of stuff also love, and I loved. So then I ended up talking to Dave Oshry and Fred Schreiber and like all these amazing people who like really brought that boomer shooter community and like the indie publisher boom that we've seen in the past few years together. And and then at a certain point, I was like, man, I don't just want to play FPS. And then I started having people making RTS games on or whatever.
Mhm.
I love indie games. Period. Like that's really my passion, or just games in general. Like it doesn't have to be indie. There are great AAA games. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. It's a lot easier to become part of the indie game community as well.
Yeah, I think there's so many different ways now, especially I know a lot of people give Discord some flack, but I love Discord because it's just the best way to connect people. And it doesn't have to just be games, but it's a great I mean it's based around games, and so that's where you meet so many people. And
Mhm.
to watch your podcast grow from, like you said, just sort of focused around FPS and talking to like, you know, little old me doing some, thing. And now you've branched out and you've done so many things that's going to warrant, hey, like a $500 investment on good equipment is something worthwhile because you're reaching a much wider audience now than you were when you first started. So I just
Right.
think that's really cool. And for me, I have always used in the keep as like a sort of a guide for the professional like approach to how to record, how to advertise, how to edit, like everything, how to have guests on and be really informative and all that stuff. So it's been a big inspiration for me. So I really appreciate you hopping on here and talking to me.
Now that I think about it, because you were actually doing like the Doom radio show thing on
Yeah,
YouTube prior to me meeting you, but wasn't I like the first episode of Doom is Dead?
you
Because
were.
you had the idea to do it, and we were at QuakeCon, and I had all the recording set up, and I was like, let's just do one now and see how
Yep.
it turns out. Yeah.
Yeah, you, me, and someone else do. We had a couple beers and we just sat down and talked. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, it's been great because I think podcasting in itself has been something I've always wanted to do. And so just getting out there and doing it is, I think, the hardest part is just starting. Once you start, you're in a pretty good spot. You can improve on stuff, but like today, I was procrastinating. Like, oh, should we do it today? And I'm glad I did. So
Yeah, it
uh,
just worked out great that I happened to
yeah,
be free today.
yeah.
So,
So you we met okay, I'll backtrack. So the gaming community itself is, for me, it's always been an escape from uh life, really. And
mhm.
so I don't find that a lot of people pick up games, later in life. Like a 35, 40-year old maybe might start playing games. Usually games are something that encapsulate your life when you're younger. And so for me, I've always been involved in the gaming community, and for better or worse, I would say it has affected uh, some some mental health experiences. And so I was curious what your experiences were with the gaming community, because we both run our own our own organizations in a way. And I know it's not always easy to deal with people on the internet and all that stuff. So what I mean, how did you get started in all of this? Like how and then where is it taking you? Like,
Okay.
yeah, it's a
So,
long question.
first and foremost, before In the Keep was a podcast or a company or a video game studio, it was that Discord. It was called the Cathala's Keep, actually, at the time.
Hmm,
uh, was meant specifically for finding pickup games in Quake Champions with people who were not jerks.
hmm,
Like, that was the whole point. Like, that was literally our mission. Me and a guy named Spaced at the time, and a few other amazing people who were like Violent Heart was a pretty early member of the crew. I
hmm.
don't know. It's been years now, but I forget what order everyone cascades into being around us. But yeah, it was all about like creating a community where people could, learn how to play this game or play it competitively without having to deal with the typical kind of bullshit that you get. Uh, you know, I think it's just online communities in general, but like especially um, these these boomer shootery type games, man, because they're just
Yeah,
they attract a certain kind of people. And I'm not saying like they attract a lot of amazing people, obviously, and I think most of the people are amazing, but there's always going to be a few bad eggs that just ruin it for everyone. And as a Doom moderator, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
sure do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I I think that answered part of your question, but
No, it did.
yeah.
I think the interesting thing is because I really started getting involved in online communities probably, I mean, like 2003. So I mean, it's still, to steal a phrase from another friend of mine, it was like the wild wild west days of the internet. People were just Facebook wasn't a thing. There was really no way of knowing who the other person
Right.
was
Right.
behind a username. So people could just do whatever they wanted. They could say whatever they wanted. They could act however they wanted. And for like a young kid, 10, 11, 12 years old, very impressionable. Um, it you don't just turn off the computer and walk away. You don't realize that. You internalize a lot of that stuff, and it just becomes
Yeah.
almost like you're dealing with people in real life. It can be very harmful, I think, and I think that that is still the case today, especially like with when you mention not even just the boomer type games, but let's talk about playing online in Call of Duty or playing.
Yeah.
Luckily Fortnite, you can't hear other people, but there's taunting and stuff like that. I mean, there's tons of games out
I
there.
used to play a lot of CS:GO, and I know
Yeah,
exactly what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just like I've gotten angry at games before, but I think some of the types of things that people say and do can be really harmful. And for me, I found that it really did sort of seep into my it seeped into my life because I would initially use games as an escape. Moved around a bit when I was younger, and so it's harder to keep friends if you're moving around a little bit. And so I found friends online, but at the same time you find people that just suck. And the more you use the online world as an escape, the more you come into contact with some of these people. So I think it's kind of like a yin and yang sort of thing, where it can really be great, but it can also really super negatively affect your life if you get involved in it too much.
I've definitely met a lot of people. I'm not gonna name any names because it might be people who but who have very clearly let their online thing that they do, whether that be like moderating some group of servers or whatever, perhaps writing the CAC awards. I don't know, but make let it become like this thing that is just so much more. It's occupying way more of their life and their time than they need to. Um,
Yes.
and it's not like a negative thing about them. It's just that like, hey, you know, in the grand scheme of things, none of this shit matters. This is just video games. This is people having fun. And if it's causing you stress and like anxiety in your life, I mean, it becomes a real. It became apparent to me very quickly. One day when I realized like, oh, like if all I do is like make and work around games and facilitate people playing games, like that's all that time that I'm doing that, I'm not playing games myself. I'm not enjoying what I'm
Mhm.
doing. And so then what's the point, really? So there's a bit of that like give until it feels good, but not necessarily to give until it hurts. I
Yeah.
don't know if
It's
that makes sense,
interesting.
but
It does. It's interesting you say that because I think I've also reached a point now where I don't play as many games as I used to. I am more in the business of organizing events and running things for other people to play games. And I wonder if all of these experiences that we've had as gamers have taken us to a point where or we're just power hungry, one or the other. But it's just taken us to a point where we don't want to play anymore. It's not as fun, it's not as enjoyable. Um, for me, I try to keep it I have periods where I get more involved than others, and I might disappear for a little while because it's like, you know what? Now that I've reached a point in my life where I can turn that off, which it wasn't. This is a fairly new development, I should
Mhm.
say. But reaching that point, I think is really difficult for people, and um, I just wonder, like, if I had never started, or if I had never gotten the urge to organize things, would I still be sucked into the world of that toxic gamer um, mentality.
One of the things that I found the most fascinating, the thing that kind of drew me in when I was interviewing people like you and Flambeau and Do and that that crew of people who were Doom moderators or Doom players in the shitty days, like in the wild west of the internet, because I
Mhm.
missed out on that, man. I was not there. I feel like an anthropologist showing up to
Mm,
the
yeah.
ruin of the Doom community, talking to you guys, and then you're like the phoenix rising from the ashes. Was like that's how the narrative was flowing in my head, you know. Um, and I just found that such a, I don't know, an appealing story. And then I realized very quickly, like, oh no, this is still like a hot topic. I should probably stop talking about this stuff because I'm just pissing people off.
Well, I think, and I don't even think it's like just singularly the Doom community either, because
Mhm.
I have the sort of interesting and unique experience of being really young when going through all of this, and like people thought I was like 20 when I was 11. Like they just didn't know. And so now that I'm 29, like I see a lot of young players and people doing, like having the same kind of issues that I was having, getting like really upset about something, and sort of taking it out on the community, because the community's like, that's your second home. That's where you go to that's where you go to have fun. And when you're not having fun, it can be really destructive. I've done, especially when I was younger, done and said a lot of stupid things. So I think my perspective from going through all of that is part of what I enjoy now about organizing and having a place where people can be respectful, because I sort of know what it's like you know, to feel like shit and to let that all of these things control, your emotions.
I've seen the paradox of small gaming communities where not very many people are always around to play. So a consistent player is better than no player, and then a shitty person who is a consistent player, you know, who is actively destructive to the community. They're like, well, we can't ban them; they're too important, you know,
Right.
or like we don't want to lose a player. And then they
Yeah.
go and if they do break up, then they break off into their two like almost simultaneous looking units, that
Hmm.
that sort of thing, and then it splits the community again. And that's just happened over and over and over again. And I've kind of given up on trying to be the guy who's going to fix that. I think I had my time trying to wrangle that cat.
Yeah, I would say that I wouldn't say I've given up, but I thought it was going to be a little bit easier. Um, I think, and maybe it's a microcosm of, you see this stuff happen all the time with companies and businesses and relationships, whatever. People go
Yeah,
in different directions, and I think that's just maybe how people are. And we can just do our best to create a good experience for the people who want to be involved in what you're involved in. But it's a lot of, I think it's hard to explain to people that aren't involved in the gaming community how this stuff can affect you, because like I said, for me, I've been doing this now. I've been with this one singular game. I have a lot of friends that I've known for 20 years, longer than I've known like real life friends. And there are incidents that happen where it's like it's like a shock to your system. It's almost like losing. It's just exactly like losing a friend in real life. It's exactly like having an argument with somebody that you care about, and so on. And it can leave you just like completely blindsided. And so I think that's a hard thing to explain to people, that you can have those types of feelings and emotions and reactions to an online community, if they're not involved in it. A lot of people just don't get it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you seem like you have some trauma associated with your time on the internet. Like, seems like you have
Yeah.
a lot to get off your chest.
Yeah, I would say. I,
Yeah,
I mean, I think a lot of people do, but yeah, I
I'm
think
blessed, man.
all.
I was much older and more mature. And
Hmm.
not, I was still an idiot. Don't get me wrong. But I was
Hmm.
much older when I really had enough access to the internet to do any damage. You know, I mean, I had like Facebook and MySpace and crap when I was a kid, but the computers were just this. I grew up in Alabama. Give me a break. Like, the computers are
Yeah,
just these foreign objects. They just do things. It's magic.
yeah,
We don't question it. Like,
yeah. Well, I talked to some people about this, and even friends that I have from high school, when we would play games online, they just get so agitated, and so it draws you into, and you tap into these emotions, and it's like, then you turn the game off and you move on with your life. And I think it takes a long time to separate those two things, especially, um, I don't know, especially when like you're younger. Like right now you can certainly do it, but I I think it's I just think it's dangerous.
yeah,
And um, Yeah, I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about, right around the time that we met and I did your podcast. It was probably like 6 months later, I think that we met in person, and
Mhm,
we went to. So there's a big convention that gets put on. It hasn't happened in person in a couple years, but Quakecon, and we all flew out to Texas, which is where it's normally held, and it's just days and days of gaming. And we talked about this a little bit before the show started, but we just spent that entire time recording podcasts and drinking, and I don't really remember like large portions of that weekend, but
mhm.
I think, how would you say that your experience involved in, and maybe the drinking doesn't have anything to do with the gaming, it certainly did for me for a little while. I would pour like a glass of wine and do one of those radio shows that you were talking about,
Mhm.
because I was just like, oh, it'll loosen me up, and then all of a sudden I'm completely drunk in the middle of it. And so I feel like they started to intertwine a little bit. um, but how is that experience for you? Because uh, yeah, it just it felt like a lot.
Um, well, at the time, and this is 2016, so not 2016.
Oh,
What,
2019, yeah,
2019?
yeah.
2019. Okay, so 3 years ago. I mean, I
Hmm.
was uh, 23, 24, and I don't know. I was just I was kind of in that part of my life where I just drank all the time. Woke up in the morning, and ran and sweated it all out and did it all again the next day, and it didn't matter. Because I was in the Air Force, and I'm not trying to say that the Air Force caused me to drink, but it's no secret that there is a drinking culture surrounding the military. Period.
Hmm.
Uh, and so it's just like I was kind of always around people that made that feel normal and everything. So when I was at QuakeCon, like I realized quickly that a lot of the people around me are having their big fun weekend. But I
Yeah.
was just like status quo, bro. You want a beer? Let's go. Let's do shit. And but in hindsight, I probably would have got a lot more done at QuakeCon. Like that opportunity would have. I don't know. Actually, I don't want to. I don't want to go back and try to change the past because had we not been out drinking at the bar all night, there's a lot of people we wouldn't have run into.
This is true.
So, c'est la vie, I say. But since then, I've gotten a little older, and those hangovers last a little bit longer, hit a little bit harder, and yeah,
Yeah.
over the past uh, maybe 6 months, I was kind of having like a dark period in my life. We don't have to get into that necessarily, the
Yeah.
specifics of it, but I was definitely hitting the bottle way too hard, and then I just kind of had a realization one day, not too in the not too distant past, where I was like, okay, I need to like look around at the people that I consider to be normal and compare myself to them and assimilate quickly, or else I'm not going to make it as like a normal civilian person
Hmm.
because it was just normal to get tanked pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
you know every weekend, all the time, every party. But and there's no alternatives either for military personnel. You can't like smoke pot or and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. So, and I'm not saying that like substance intake is necessary, but since people are doing it anyway, it was like the more destructive substance was the legal one, and therefore the one that everybody did.
Were your experiences? I mean, obviously, I've never been in the military, so
Mhm.
I mean, I imagine that the things that you had to do, and the life that you were leading at that time, created some stress that
Oh yeah.
caused the drinking. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say caused it. I mean, I
Or you
joined
should say
when
you
I was.
used it as a way to cope with it.
Probably,
Yeah.
deep down there in the psyche somewhere. At one point, I was in an alcohol related incident, right?
Mm.
Which involved me having to then go to at the Air Force uses a program called ADAPT that is sort of an Alcoholics Anonymous similar sort of thing. But essentially, it was like an intake, and it was just like you talk to the psychologist and you talk to the alcohol specialist and all that kind of shit. And at that point, I sat down. We had an honest conversation about what had brought me to the point where I had this incident. And even the doctor was like, "I don't think you're like an alcoholic. You don't seem like." I was just like, "I just like to drink beer a lot, but I could
Hmm.
do without it. It's not that big a deal. I just happen to be drinking beer on the day that this happened, and that was really my attitude about it. Now, in hindsight, I mean, might not have been the same kind of an evening had I not had a few beers earlier that day.
Mhm.
But that was kind of that was an earlier wake up call. That was kind of like okay, people are starting to notice this is affecting my life now. And it took a long time after that to really just make that decision. It was like alcohol just needs to not be a big part of my life anymore. Not saying I'll never drink again or anything. You know, if we're having a couple of beers or a bottle of wine or whatever, but I will not. I don't ever want to be back to the point where you're drinking more days out of the week than not, because ultimately it's expensive and bad for your health. And my grandfather is actually dying of liver disease very slowly, and he's still getting around. He's great. I love spending time with him. He's older. This was kind of a, he's going to die of something soon
Yeah.
anyway, but that's kind of fucked up to say, but I do love my grandfather. I want to make that clear. But he was the same way, exactly like me. He was in the army, and then he just never stopped drinking after the
Mhm.
army. Kept drinking all the way through, and then it's just ultimately it's going to be what did him in, and he knows that, and I know that. And spending time around him really made me realize like that's not how I want to go.
Yeah, I think there are there are two things that you can do really in life when you meet people, and I really try not to be judgmental, like you are with your grandfather. Like you know that these are his circumstances and this is what's happened to him, and hindsight's always 2020. You can always wish or think that if you had done something differently, you'd have a different outcome. But I think
Yeah,
you can take two things. You can take away things from someone. Oh, I want to be like that, or I don't want to be like that.
I'll tell you
And
the moment when I
yeah.
really like realized it. Like it really hit me hard that I was not okay. Was I came home for Christmas, and I did not know what Grandpa was sick with. I knew he was sick,
Mhm.
but I mean, me and Papa are all about drinking whiskey and beer and all that kind of stuff together. So I brought his Christmas present was a bottle of Jack Daniels, and when I gave it to him, and everyone in the room looked at me like I was a jackass.
Mm.
Of course, I mean, of course, no one told me, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, it was an innocent mistake to some degree, but I was just like, yeah, I should really start thinking uh, long term about how I feel about this, and that ultimately led to the decision that came later.
Yeah. And that's it sucks. I think that's just one thing that sucks about how you learn lessons about
Water, water.
LaCroix, man. LaCroix is really good. Have you
Oh
tried
my,
Zevia?
no.
So Zevia is just like it. Literally, it's sparkling water, but it's marketed as like sparkling water soda.
Mhm.
You can, because I don't drink soda anymore because I just think soda is not great for you, and
I don't.
whatever.
I don't drink soda. I mean,
Yeah,
every once in a while. I mean, if I'm feeling really good and it's a great day, treat myself to a couple of Coca Colas, but
yeah,
only in the can.
right.
You're right. I don't want it any other way. I don't want a fountain drink. I don't want
No, no,
McDonald's
it's
fucking
got to
around
come
with
from
my
a can.
settings. Yes,
That's the best
cold.
kind of. It's the carbonation,
But
when
that's
it
a
hits your
rare
throat.
treat. A
Yeah,
rare.
right. So Zevia has these flavors. You can get ginger ale, Coca Cola, Mountain Dew, whatever, and they don't call them that, but they taste exactly like soda, and it's all
Uh,
like plant based, healthy stuff. So
so I don't
anyway,
even want it to taste like soda. I like Lacroix. I like that it's virtually
LaCroix is good.
flavorless.
I had to force myself, actually. That was something I touched a little bit on in episode 2, which was like the dieting thing where I gave up soda, and I worked in a lot of law firms, and I was like, why do all these law firms just have sparkling water? Like, where is the soda? Where are all the good drinks? And so the first couple times I had like LaCroix or whatever, I spit it out. I thought it was awful, and that's just a healthier alternative, and it gives you the carbonation that you so desire with
Like
soda.
I don't like sweet stuff necessarily. Every once in
Yeah.
a while, like I said, I want something. Like I have like a sugar craving, and then
Mhm.
it once it's satisfied, it's satisfied. But I think when I was a kid, I was like addicted to sugar. Like, and I think
Mhm.
most Americans are, right? Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
drank fucking soda all day long. I
Oh,
woke up in
yeah.
the morning and I used to carry a 3 liter Fago orange, in my backpack to school
Yeah.
and drink it in a day. Not kidding. Um, but that's just like we never like talked about nutrition or like
Nope.
or how your physical health affects your mental health. Like that
Correct.
was never a conversation until I was an adult. Not
Right.
really.
Me either. And I think, like, I remember um the Surge cooler that we had. Like we just get an entire cooler full of
Oh yeah.
Surge, like the most disgusting, horrible drink you could have. I remember when they came out with Red Mountain Dew. I'd go
Oh,
to the movies, and
Code Red Mountain Dew.
yeah, this
Dude,
is
quick short story.
yeah.
So this guy who's an MTL, it was a military training leader, right,
Hmm.
in uh, Gulfport. Name was Technical Sergeant Miller, and he was like one of my favorite NCOs I ever served under. But he was a psycho. He was literally like that kind
Hmm.
of crazy, screaming at everybody drill sergeant kind of character. But I loved him. And every weekend, right before he would dismiss us, he always said like, "And don't you spend all weekend sitting in your fucking dorm room with your Code Red Mountain Dew and your flaming hot Cheetos playing video games.
Yeah,
Go outside." And then that was the end of the weekend.
well, that's true. You know, that's sounds like my childhood. What I
But
was gonna
that
say was,
that
yeah, go ahead.
diet leads to a fucked up head,
It does. It
fucked up
does.
body's a fucked up head.
The movie theaters were. I mean, this is pre Netflix. This is
Yeah.
going to Blockbuster every Friday. But you go to the movie theater, and it's like not every movie theater had Red Mountain Dew because it was still kind of. I don't know if it was new. I don't actually know when it came out, but it wasn't. It just wasn't everywhere. And so whenever we went to one movie theater, I was like, I gotta have the Red Mountain Dew, and so I get a large. And they're like, "Do you want to make it a super size for 25 cents more?" Sure. And they literally give you a bucket of sugar. And I can't tell you how many of those I had. I mean,
Do you
eating
remember Happy Crack? Did
Happy
that
Crack.
did that happen in your school?
I don't think so,
So in my high school and
unless I
probably middle
blocked it
school
out.
too, it was like this thing where people made Happy Crack, which was just like sugar and Kool-Aid
Mm.
packets raw in a bag, and you just eat that shit all day. It was like a huge fad.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nope, that never happened to me.
And I
You
think
you'd
back on
think it
it,
would have, but
but all the research that I've come to understand in the past, decade, I'll say, um, about nutrition and about how, for years we were lied to and told that fat was bad and sugar was fine.
mhm.
And I grew up eating Pop Tarts or Little Debbie
Yep.
cakes for breakfast, you know,
Cinnamon
and
Toast
my
Crunch.
parents didn't think anything of it, and they had no reason to. They,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's true. I mean, that's what you do with kids. It's like I go to the grocery store, and the grocery store used to have, and I tell this story to people all the time, and those sugar cookies, right? Just a tin of sugar cookies.
yeah.
And I'd have friends over, and it'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to take the sugar cookies downstairs, and we'll play games or whatever." I would eat the whole thing, and then I'd go have dinner. And it's like nobody ever said, "Hey, I don't think you should do that."
Hmm.
And it wasn't until right around 18, 19, I said, "No, you know what? I don't look like Brad Pitt, and I'm not anywhere near close. So maybe I should try to be somewhat healthier here." But it's a big problem because how many people get made fun of because of their weight, and how many people get made fun of just because of their appearance? I mean, that can severely affect you forever. And I think even when I read stories about people who have like massive weight loss, someone that's completely transformed who they are and how they are, they can't be comfortable in their body because they just endured years of, saying whatever it is people, hearing whatever it is people say to them. But I think it's a still a super huge problem. I mean, I went to Burger King this morning. I went out drinking last night, and on the way home we got Burger King, and like, it's totally normal just to have, you know, bacon and cheese croissant.
Yeah. But it's a
Nobody says not to.
socio-cultural problem. It's much
True.
bigger than us. Like this is uh, a noticeable thing. Yeah, we it's incredibly decadent, and we are privileged to live in a world where some of our biggest problems are having too much food to eat and not knowing how to quit.
This is
Yeah.
true.
So on one hand, I I do kind of feel that way. I'm just like it would be better if people were educated,
Yes.
uh, preferably systematically. But now that we have the internet and everything, people are learning for themselves, and hopefully there will be a there already has been a huge cultural shift in just people's education about nutrition in
Mhm.
general, just with the access to information. But and of course, there's a lot of weird shit out there. I mean, you could be anything from a vegan to a person who only eats fruit to a person who only eats like grass-fed, pasture-raised elk meat or whatever. I
Right.
don't know. Yeah, you can be whatever you want. And there are clearly many different, uh, relatively healthy ways to get through life. But I don't know. I don't really think about it too much.
No, it's true. I mean, I do think when you have a society like we have where and I'm trying to say this so that it doesn't come off as a weird thing to say, but you tell people that they can be whoever they want, do whatever they want, you know, have as much freedom as they want.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes people take that and they run with it in the wrong direction. And that's not to say that we shouldn't have those things, but to your point, the educational system and hey, let's learn about you should learn about all these things, okay? But hey, let's learn about a war that happened in 1700. I think that's something that you should learn about, but I also don't think that you should have things along with that. Teaching people how to do their taxes, financial classes, stuff like that. Teaching people to eat healthy, uh,
Yeah,
maybe not having pizza parties all the time.
having healthy food in the cafeteria. And I
Yeah.
don't mean like, because I remember when the Michelle Obama's new
Hmm.
lunches came
Hmm.
out, and that shit was just a huge bummer. It was like,
Yeah.
because I live in the South, man. We went from having like, country fried steak and gravy to freezer food, and I was just like, this is lame.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, it's very pervasive too in the office setting, in businesses where they're just like, "Hey, you guys did a really good job working 90 hours this week.
Oh
Here's
my.
17 pizzas for you."
My
And it's like,
favorite
"Oh,
is the Planet Fitness like donut and pizza parties. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't think so."
Oh my god, like, they do it all the time, or at least the one that's here in town did. Like, Planet Fitness would have, like, free pizza days and free donut days, and I'm just like, "This is just reckless," you know? 'Cause, I mean, that's a genius. Whoever came up with the idea of
Yeah.
Planet Fitness is a freaking genius. Because the point is to get people to subscribe and then forget that they subscribed, or, like, just,
Mhm.
you don't need them to go to the gym, and if everyone who had a subscription showed up to the gym on the same day at the same time, Planet Fitness could not handle it, you know?
Right.
They make their money off the people who actually don't use their facilities.
Well, and it's also like all inclusive, you don't have to go to the gym there. You can go there and get a tan,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You can do everything there. So, yeah. What Was there anything in particular that led you to go into the military? Was that like a decision that you made early on, or were there other circumstances?
No, it was a lot of I was the kind of teenager who, when I told my parents that I was thinking about joining the Air Force, they were like so confused,
Mm,
because it was like the most unlike me. My dad sat me down and was like, "Look, this does not sound like something that I would have ever thought of you doing. Like, are you serious about that?" And I was. I was young and in love, and I thought that that was going to be the best way for me to take myself out of a relatively, lower class living style to,
mhm,
I'm not trying to like compare apples to oranges with anybody out there in the world dealing with much worse circumstances, but I was living in a trailer, didn't have air conditioning that functioned correctly, just wasn't comfortable or happy or making any real money. I was an electrician's apprentice, and I'd never even heard of a union. Man, I was making
mhm,
chump change, and I was killing myself basically working from like 19 to 20. And then in that time frame, I just made the decision is like, if I just commit to a term in the military, and everything that comes with that, and it's a lot more than going in, but that my life would be better. When I got out, I would have a GI Bill, and I would have some stability. I'd have a couple of years to just grow some financial stability that I'd never, you know, even dreamed of having. And so, in many ways, it was like probably the most constructive decision I ever made in my life.
mm.
because I was really not. I wouldn't say I was like on the path to destruction necessarily, but I was definitely not doing anything useful with myself at the time. I wanted. I told you before, like I wanted to be a pro wrestler, and then I got
Yeah.
like injured, and I just like I just like there's no way I'm gonna make enough money to like survive off that. Uh, so it just made sense.
Well, I think you should also, and it seems like you are, content with this, but I think you should also be kinder to yourself when you talk about it, because, people can only relate to the things that they've gone through. Like you mentioned that you're not trying to compare yourself to someone that's had a worse life
Right.
than you.
Right.
I think your experience is your experience, and that wasn't it for you. So, I wouldn't look at it like it was something where,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I just,
This is a
I
huge
don't,
complex that you've uncovered
yeah.
about me. This is like a recurring issue that's affected me for a long time. But
Hmm.
I was sitting there talking to my therapist one day, trying to explain it to them, like uh, it in the service, right? My mental health issues in my mind felt like something I needed to keep to myself because in
Hmm.
my head I'm thinking there are other service members who need this stuff and
Yeah.
these resources far more than me. I should not be complaining. I should be glad that I'm not in their situation.
Hmm.
And it took a very long time to just kind of do what you just said and say, no, my problem is a problem. And regardless of whether it's better or worse or whatever than anyone else's, it still needs to be solved. And so, yeah, that was I think that anyone could just take what you just said, quote that, and live by those words, essentially.
Well, I think it's so fascinating to me because now that have started doing this, and I've really been sort of scouring the internet and looking for different stories and things that people go through. It's so funny that you talk about when you said that you don't need this as much as the next person does, so I'm just going to internalize it and try to move on. Same experience with me, and I think that's the same experience with everybody, and it's just a real eye opener to know that you're not an insane human being, and that
Right.
everybody, or at least lots of people, are having the same problems that you are. And so it's like you're not doing yourself any favors by not getting yourself help.
Right.
It's a really hard step to take. And
Even while I was getting therapy, I
yeah.
would say things like I would constantly recite that, like, I shouldn't be in here. I shouldn't be bothering you with
Hmm.
this. I know that there's someone else who should be in this seat right now, and I'm taking up valuable time and
Hmm.
resources. And that was really kind of my headspace about it. And also, I just didn't want to admit to myself that I had an issue.
Yeah.
Uh, I was very aware of the fact that like depression and anxiety were ruining my life, but for some reason, I just denied that for a long, long, long time.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is, because I think I did the same thing. It's like, well, you know what? I'm just gonna keep pushing through it.
Right.
I'll get over this eventually. It's some weird thing that's just for me, and it's like it's completely involuntary a lot of times, or a lot of times it's related to something that happened in your past. I don't know if um and feel free to not talk about things that you don't want to talk about. Are you still in therapy right now, or
No, I
no?
graduated therapy like a year ago.
And how was that experience for you? Because I'm starting on Monday. I'm just genuinely curious.
So, just to be very clear and open, I have been to a lot of therapists.
Hmm.
I've talked to psychiatrists, psychologists, like I said, alcohol counselors. I've
Hmm.
talked to private counselors who just volunteered for Air Force or military service in general. I've talked to lieutenant colonel, who
Hmm.
were also doctors in this sort of stuff, chaplains, you name it. I essentially became towards the end of my time, when I was an NCO for a bit at the end of my term with the Air Force, my squadron kind of depended on me to be in charge of maintaining all of the information related to if someone needs one of these services, how best can they go
Hmm.
about that, or which one of them works best for them, because there are different rules. A big thing in the service, and I'm just going to say this outright because it needs to be kind of said, is that a lot of people deny their problems because they have security clearances, or because they're afraid they're going to lose their job, or they have a big deployment that they're very excited about. And I understand that, like, it just is what it is at a certain point, but it's better for you to be safe and grounded than to go off. And I think people should also kind of realize the personal responsibility that comes with that. Like, if you know that you have some serious mental health issues and you're hiding that, and then you're downrange with someone, or or you're in charge of a big mission that could affect a lot of people's lives and millions of dollars in government assets or whatever,
Mhm.
and you're not being honest with yourself and your peers about that, I mean, you could really cause a lot of issues. And I've seen some, people really melt down, but I've also seen some people go get the help that they needed. Oh, that was a lot. It's kind of stressful to think about, but
Yeah, it is, and obviously I don't have those experiences, but something that struck me about it was, shit, I just lost my train of thought. I'm gonna
well,
cut that out probably.
what I was gonna say, let's just keep it going.
Yeah, yeah.
What I was gonna say is that because I had been very open and honest with everybody about just how experienced I was with getting different types of therapy throughout my time, and I've, like I said, tried all of the different kinds you could do it pretty much. uh, I was just like a valuable resource for people. As if somebody was having a problem, I was just like, hey, let's go chat outside where nobody can hear us, and I will point you in the right direction.
Mhm,
I'll get you the help that you need, or I'll tell you how to get it if you are willing to go get it. That kind of thing. I even
yeah,
had myself ordained as a minister so that I could argue, hopefully, if it ever came up, that if someone admitted to something dark to me or whatever, that I could just plead like they said that under my to me as a minister and not as an NCO, and therefore I don't
mhm,
have to testify. That's how serious I
interesting.
was about trying to help my peers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge step to take, and I think it's something that not only helps them, but it helps you too. I think when you talk about personal, like, accountability and, being honest with yourself, I think at the end of the day, like, I know for me, a lot of times will take, or look for validation, from other people, and, I've done what I feel is a lot, for myself, to improve my life and improve my mental health and state and all that. But I think definitely you can get caught up in, making decisions, in your life for something that's not you, and something that, whether it's another person or another thing or whatever, at the end of the day, you have to be able to make the decisions for yourself, and you have to be comfortable with yourself, and you know because all of these things have potential and possibly will sort of fall to the wayside, and what are you left with? You're left with thoughts in your head and the decisions that you've made. And so I think that's a really tough thing, for people to do, is to realize that all of these things, all of these improvements that you make are not for other people, they're for you.
Hmm.
And that's for me, that's still something that I'm working on, because I think I don't know, I think you just find yourself in these situations where, you have something that you feel like is your purpose or your passion or whatever, and when it doesn't work out, you find yourself just sort of like wandering, aimlessly, and
Yeah.
it's just a tough thing to do, is to set yourself sort of free of all of that, and to be comfortable with who you are and your shortcomings and your strengths and all that stuff.
I really think that at the end of the day, we all have to realize that it's like it's not there's no cure to any of this
Hmm.
stuff. There's no magical drug that's going to make it just suddenly better.
Hmm.
At least not in my experience. I was on SSRIs for like a year. I know it was a weird experience, but there's really nothing that's going to make everything better except like identifying the problem and solving the problem at the root of it. Um, or at
I've been
least
on
just
them for
coming to
5 years.
terms. I would say, if I had, one way to really put it,
Hmm.
is to just be patient. Like, you have to learn how to just accept yourself and be patient with yourself, and not
Yes.
like get meditation was huge for me when I got
Hmm.
into meditation, and I still do it all the time. I'm not talking about like chanting Buddhist monk stuff or anything. I just the practice of mindfulness in general,
Hmm.
and part of that process is that people will say things like clear your mind, or only just breathe in and out and only pay attention to that. And it doesn't matter what you're focused on. The point is that you're focusing on something, and when you realize that your mind has drifted away from it, instead of getting angry at yourself and saying like, "Oh, man, I was supposed to be focusing on whatever," and then like starting that cascade of drifting, destructive thoughts. If you can just say, "I now notice that I have stopped counting, and now I'm going to go back to counting," and then you
Mhm.
just reassume doing what you were doing. That alone, just that basic little principle. I mean, it gave me so many tools to build on in terms of that. So now, like, hey, let's say I fall off the bandwagon like a month. You hear like, oh, Ty's drunk again, hanging out in the hell forward. You know, saying bad words on Twitch with Bridgeburner or whatever. Let's say you did hear that. Um, I remember when I was in therapy. Another good example of just a genius thing that my therapist told me was, well, actually, I think I said this to her and then she just approved. But I had quit smoking for a long time. Like I was off nicotine completely, and I was
Mhm.
very proud of myself. And uh, it was probably like maybe a year or so, and then I fell off the bandwagon hardcore. But for the first time in my life, I like realized that I wasn't angry at myself. Because usually when this happened, it would start that whole downward spiral of like, I'm a fuck up, I've just ruined my life, and now I'm
Mhm.
gonna die of lung cancer. It's gonna cost so much more money, and I just can't quit, so I'm pathetic and all that kind of thing. But at that point in time, I just said, you know what? I think that when I get ready to, I'll try to quit again, and I'll just be patient with myself, and I'll probably go through periods in life where I do and don't use nicotine, and as long as I'm okay with that and I recognize it for what it is, I'm not going to judge myself too harshly. Now, that doesn't mean I don't still want to quit, but as you can see in
Sure.
this podcast episode, I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to what I said about being kind to yourself because for me, I've had some things, recently, fairly recently that have affected me a lot and
Mhm.
I did the same thing, downward spiral, all of these things. And so then I try to look at the situation that I'm in and all the things that are I want to be good to myself, right? So I work from home, and if I want to have a 1 hour catatonic state, where I just lay in my bed and stare at the ceiling, and I try to heal from whatever it is that I'm going through, I can do that, and that part of it is really good for me. And a lot of people would say, "Oh, well, you're wasting a lot of time there. You're not doing anything. You're not being productive." And it's like, well, you know what? I am being actually very productive. I am
Yeah.
healing my own problems and my own mental health. And I think you just have to understand who you are and what you need, and you shouldn't have to apologize about any of that to anybody. So I think whatever your process is, however you feel comfortable, finally kicking nicotine or whatever, like that's the process you have to take. That's the road you have to take. And
Yeah.
I think you've done a lot of good work on yourself just based on this conversation. You're doing a lot of good stuff. So don't sell yourself short either.
No, I was just saying to someone else the other day, like I recently kind of had this epiphany that like in the concept of like nirvana and like you're ascending to something closer to
Hmm.
understanding and universal knowledge or whatever. I ain't saying I'm there, but I feel like I'm like a step higher, like I'm just like
Yeah.
one tier above where I was before, and as long as I always feel like I'm bettering myself, I will be satisfied with that, or at least currently I feel that way. um because like I said, man, just my entire life, uh is for as long as I can remember, I was just so crippled by being worried about everything all the time. I
Hmm.
was the kind of kid like where if I forgot to bring my homework home to do, I would cry and like have my mom drive me back to the school to go get it. Like I was
Yeah.
terrified, of ever doing anything wrong. And then that sort of idea pervades up until I was a teenager. And then when I realized that when you can do things wrong and not get in trouble for it,
Yep.
off to the races. Then I was crazy.
Yeah.
um, I'm glad I had all of this experience because I really do feel this way, man. I call it whatever you want. We don't have to get all like weird and religious or magical or anything like that. That's not what I mean here. But I feel like I was put on this earth and put through the challenges and things that I've been through so that specifically when I run into someone else in life, maybe someone younger or a peer or whatever who's going through something similar, I am fully prepared to help them get through that if I need to.
Hmm.
or point them in the right direction or whatever. I'm way better off, I'm way more useful to serve humanity having gone through this stuff. And there's a lot of symbolism around that.
Well, I think too, as you get older, like you start to think, well, what is it? Maybe a couple of decisions that you've made, a couple of things that you thought, I'm going to do this forever, and
Right.
then that doesn't happen. It's like, okay, well, what is it that's going to be the thing that drives me? And I feel very similarly. I feel like so I've been on an SSRI for 5 years, and
Which
I
one?
think it's just generic Zoloft sertraline.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
and
I
it's
was on Wellbutrin first, but that
okay.
had like that total opposite effect for me.
Uh-huh.
Like it it didn't help at all. It just made everything I was already thinking 10 times worse. So I was like,
Interesting.
like they gave me the Wellbutrin. The day I walked in first, I was like, I'm gonna fucking jump off a building, and then they were like, so how do you feel after a week of the medication? It's like, now I'm definitely gonna jump off the building. They're
I'm
like, we
sorry
need
to
to get you
laugh.
off that shit.
Yeah,
Uh,
I guess it's everyone's experience. Like I'm on the lowest dosage that they give you
yeah.
for this, and I felt it immediately. Actually, I took the pill. I had like a really restless night sleeping the day that I picked up the pills, and I was like, well, it was a Friday, and I didn't want to take it because I wanted to take it at home over the weekend where I could like see how it was going to make me feel. But
Mhm.
I just had this horrible night, and I didn't sleep at all. And so right before I went to work, I said, screw it, and I popped it. And like I used to drive this van into the city, transporting people and stuff. And so I'm driving the van, and it just like hits me. I swear I got that's the last time. That's the highest I've ever been in my life. Was that pill, and it just set me into this like.
Yeah.
I have a friend that I was working with, and you can ask him. I was loaded that day, and like the thing that I noticed was that I used to yawn all the time. I used to have 4 or 5 cups of coffee, and I'd still be like taking a nap at lunch.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah. I
I
know.
I didn't yawn for days. Like I was like I was wide awake, and I started to learn like okay, being tired is a sign of depression, and this and that, and so like um now I'm starting to lose where I was going with this, but I think my
You're probably
initial
just
thought,
dehydrated though.
maybe, yeah, that's probably true.
That's
Um,
usually the solution.
yeah,
It's
my
like,
initial thought was that I'm going to take this pill and it's going to solve all my problems, and it solved a lot of my problems, but it didn't solve every problem. And I think to your point, what you said earlier, uh, somewhat of what you said earlier, which is that there's no cure. There's really no one cure. This is something that you have to keep working at and working at and working at. And it's not always going to be easy. And you're not always going to find, ways that help you right away. You might have to try 10, 20, 30 more things that are going to help you. And so for me, I'm starting to realize like this, like doing this, talking to people, and again, it doesn't matter if 5, 10, 1 person watches this. I think for me, this is where I'm starting to feel really comfortable, which is talking about, these things that people go through, and realizing that we're all kind of the same in a lot of ways. We all go through a lot of these things, and we all feel a lot of the same things. And, um, just getting a chance to talk to people like you and hearing their experiences and stuff. Yeah.
I think that just having conversations like this and putting them out there. I mean, if even one person hears this and
Mhm.
anything at all resonates with them enough for the to like, even if it's just an incremental step on their way to getting help or to just making that big decision to make a change in themselves that they need to do themselves, uh, it's well worth it. I think that
Yeah.
like this is great. Uh,
Well, so now you're out of the military. What are you doing right now? How is your life going right now?
so I mean, like, dude, I don't even know how to explain the ride I've been on. Like, it's so insane to me. Like, where I like what I said earlier about how I was kind of under the impression that I was just going to be like kind of poor and hungry forever.
Hmm.
And then, I had this plan, like if I do the military and I take that time to reset and everything, when I get out, I will have something lined up for me to do. I'll figure something out in that time frame. And then so when that 6 years was done, I had already built in the keep and I had worked on Realms Deep, you
Hmm.
know, and that got me in touch with a whole lot of people in the games industry. So, and by the time that, it was really time for me to get out, I was already kind of like project managing and producing Call of Ragnar and Stellar Valkyrie. And I had been, I don't want to say like the most important thing or whatever, but like a huge part of putting Realms Deep together and everything. So I had proven to people that I could manage a freaking project, I guess, if that's what you
Yeah.
want to call it. But so I became a producer, project manager for 3D Realms. Fred was like really amazing. Flew us out, flew me and Jahar out for Realms Deep last year, and while we were there,
Mhm.
he was just like, I had actually been asking him, and this is just kind of person I am, man. I ain't afraid to ask questions. So I was
Yeah.
like asking, like, hey, if I wanted to find a game, a job in the games industry, could you help me like put together my CV and all that kind of thing, just to since I've worked with you and you know what I've done.
Mhm.
And he wrote me back and he was just like, nah, come work for us. And I was like, okay, I'll take that. So when I was a little kid, man, I played Duke Nukem on the PlayStation with my dad,
Yep.
and what we're doing now, all this cool stuff that 3D Realms has done since the fall of that game, uh,
Mhm.
and Fred and Mike buying the company and just revitalizing the brand in a lot of ways. It's been really cool. It's an interesting time for uh, that. A lot of these companies, New Blood, uh,
Yeah.
Night Dive, all these really amazing sort of like uh, indie publishers who kind of started off in our community, like really
Mhm.
branched off from, Dusk was huge for me. Uh, seeing them turn into like successful businesses gives me a lot of hope for the my ability to one day retire and just let In the Keep be exactly what I want it to be.
Yeah, and I will say, I said this earlier, but definitely like an inspiration to me too, in a way, because I'm the same way. Like I grew up. My dad plopped me in front of the computer in like 1995, while he played Doom online, and Doom, Quake. Um, oh, there's another one. Um, anyway, Diablo, and so just like being involved in this community, and so for me, the coolest thing I ever did was the QuakeCon 2020 with all those people and
Oh
all that
yeah,
stuff, and
we did that.
I yeah, you were fucking
King
awesome
Dimes
commentating on a
tournaments
lot of
also.
stuff. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, and I'd love to as well. I've looked in the gaming industry. I don't know where I'd fit in, but like it for inspirational purposes. Just like you started this thing on your own and you worked towards what you wanted and you got a really great opportunity. I think it's just super cool to now, having had this
Right.
conversation, to see this whole journey of where you've gone.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. That is what's wrong.
Oh, I
That's
bother people all the time. Yeah.
I know that's what people are doing
Yeah.
wrong 99% of the time. Is like
Yep.
because every time I try to explain the situation that I found myself in, people are like, "How did you do that?" I was like, "I just asked a lot of questions, man.
Hmm.
I was not afraid to be at 4 a.m. in the morning and message someone like John Carmack and say, "Hey, do you want to be on my podcast?" And even though
Right.
he said no, I got a reply.
Yep.
And over time, it's like once I built a pretty good library of people, and I've always kept it like I've told you this, I think from the jump, like no matter how big the guests get, I'm still going to have like super indie stuff on here. I still
Yeah.
want to talk about the Doom community. I still want to talk about mods. I'm never going to get away from that, or at least not in my current forecast of my vision
Hmm.
of the company. But you know, when I can point to like, well, look at my catalog and see the other people on here, and people take the show a lot more seriously than they would if it
Hmm.
was just a bunch of people they never heard of. And there's nothing wrong with people you never heard of, but that's not how you draw in an audience.
Right.
So for every John St. John, there's two or three other people who you probably never heard of. But I hope that if they hit that subscribe button and they like end up listening to the show and just liking the vibe of the show, that they'll hear these stories of these amazing indie devs and community moderators. And oh, God, I've had social media managers on the show.
Hmm.
I've had so many different musicians. I did a whole panel just on the people making the music for a lot of the games that were in Realms Deep. And I want to keep doing stuff like that. I want to be like a, an outlet of information for
Yeah.
people who are thinking about getting into this industry or just fascinated by it or whatever, to like learn and hopefully, get get there faster than I did.
Well, my favorite episode of In the Keep is, you did an interview
Yours?
with this guy named Human Bones. Yeah, mine. Yeah, episode 5. Um, well, it's been really great. I just want to thank you again for coming on here and talking to me, because I know that this stuff's not easy to talk about, and I'm working on how to properly structure a conversation, and maybe a little, maybe I take things in some weird directions sometimes. But I thought I really learned a lot about you, and it was just great to have you on, and I want you to be able to plug all of your stuff. I tried to wear this shirt for you, but plug away all of wherever
Okay.
we can find in the keep, and all that stuff.
So the big thing right now is the two games that we're working on. So Call of Seregnar, you can go to callofseregnar.com. You can find it on Twitter at Call of Seregnar. But if ultimately make your way to one of the store pages, probably Steam or Itch or whatever you prefer, and hit the like and the wish list buttons and all that stuff. That would be great. Also, my baby, my like brainchild in many ways, but also a collaboration with the Scumhead and Uber Gawai and Tristan Clark and all these amazing people. Stellar Valkyrie is I'm just so excited about it, and it's a Doom Engine project, so I think you would like it too.
Hmm.
Maybe there'll be some crossover in the audience. I don't know, but if you like space birds and bounty hunting and stupid dad jokes and animal puns and also shooting things, I think that you will really enjoy Stellar Valkyrie. Otherwise, if you want to check out the podcast or any of this stuff, inthekeep.com is your destination.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Had a great time talking to you today.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
All right.